There is a sculpture in Vatican City and a replica in the town of Melidi on the famed Camino Santiago. And this sculpture is by Canadian sculptor Timothy Schmaltz and simply titled Be Welcoming, which is the title of today's message. On the one side, which you see is a pilgrim with an outstretched arm. So you can look in on that. So he's got a hoodie on, he's got a backpack, and his arm is outstretched as if perhaps to ask for help. Okay? As you move around to the other side of this same sculpture, exact same sculpture, which is the second slide, you see this. So the backpack transforms into wings, the hoodie becomes the angel's hair, and the arm, same outstretched arm, now invites you, perhaps, to discover yourself, to discover who you truly are in Christ. Same sculpture, two sides, as some might say, of the same coin. An invitation or a plea for help on the one hand, and an invitation on the other. The scripture reading that we had just now from Hebrews speaks to that fact of welcoming the stranger, entertaining, showing hospitality, because in so doing, you might be entertaining angels unaware. Good morning. I was reminded by a few people of, I no recollection of the sermon, but the two phrases that Herbert, is that right? And somebody else mentioned to me is what I said many years ago. I think when Andrew Raman was here as vicar. Wah si tipe kya. And it was about prisons, right? And about this thing called Teng Sa, which was the renunciation of their affiliation to gangs. And in some respects, a wonderful reminder to us that as someone leaves the only family they've known, people in the secret society and the triads, they need a new family. But oftentimes, there is no family for them to go because they don't have biological family. Where do they go? They've left the brotherhood, they've left their family. Where do they go? As a child of God, as Tipe Kya, where do they go? Is there a place of welcome within the walls of CCR? So if you were not here 2 Sundays ago when Reverend Glenn spoke about, or gave the first part, he spoke compellingly on the biblical basis for hospitality, and referencing Ephesians 2:11-22, talked about divine hospitality, for which we who were once aliens, the very people who are now sitting in these pews, have now through the blood of Christ been brought near. If you missed the sermon, and if it's still on the website, I would encourage you to listen to that first part, so that what I will do is just add on to that and provide context to that first part of the sermon. So permit me, even as Reverend Glenn has spoken about the almost like the biblical basis or the theology around the notion of hospitality, let me, if I can today, speak on the principles of hospitality, building on Reverend Glenn's sermon, and providing you with some thoughts for which, through your discernment and discussion as a group, as a church, might develop modalities of hospitality that bless those to which you extend hospitality to. The New Testament reading from Hebrews 13, 1-8 provides principles, I believe, for Christian hospitality. More broadly for Christian living, the 8 verses. Emphasizing love for one another, showing hospitality and kindness to strangers, remembering those in need. Particularly, they singled out those in prison. The passage also addresses something that is very painful for me and touches close to heart: sexual morality. It talks about materialism, importance of following the example of leaders in this church. And so I want to focus on the principles of hospitality in verse 2 of Hebrews 13, complementing the gospel passage that Reverend Glenn read a moment ago. So 3 principles, classic 3-point sermon, okay? The first principle is that hospitality is a person, not just a principle. The origin of the word hospitality is the Latin word hospes, Hospes, which means, interestingly enough, both guest and host. Okay? So it's not just about the host, it's also about the guest. And it is therefore a person, not just an action. The word then evolved in Latin, hospitale, singular, hospitalis, plural, which means a guest house or shelter. And in the 14th century, a hospital was a place of shelter for the needy, for the elderly, and also for the sick. So it wasn't confined to those who were sick. It was only in the 16th century that it began to be known more specifically as a place for those who are sick. But the broader meaning of the word hospital is a place of hospitality. Same root word. Hostel, hotel, even hospice. Even hospice are derivative words from that initial origin. And so a hospice traditionally referred to a place of shelter for travelers and pilgrims. Interesting, right? You say hospice now, let me invite you to a hospice to stay. People will look at you like, are you crazy, right? But that was the original meaning. It was just a place for pilgrims and travelers, and only later on for those who were terminally ill. Again, the idea is hospitality. This space, no matter what your circumstance, station, condition in life, you're offered a place of hospitality. And so while modern usage has diverged, the shared, you say in English, etymological, got school teachers here, right? Etymological origins highlights a historic commonality in the act of caring for others. Hence, hospitality is a person and not just a principle. It's you, it's me, it's us. My life took a major detour, and detour is actually putting it very mildly, on August 30th, 2014, when my very public life at that point was also very publicly exposed for my marital infidelity, for which both as president of a global charity, Prison Fellowship International, a priest in this diocese, I was placed, rightly so, on organizational and church discipline. In that space, not only because he's here, but in that space was grace. Extended to me by a gentleman sitting about 10 rows back, Bishop Renis Benaya, who was then the Bishop of Singapore. And in that space of the decimation of my life was extended to me grace, was extended to me hospitality, the cure of a soul, the care of a soul. Hospitalis, hospitality. Hospitality is a person, not just a principle. Be hospitable, don't just extend it. Flowing from the first is the second principle, which is that hospitality is a posture, not just a place. A posture, not just a place. The church can be a place of hospitality. Comfortable seats, no cushion, but anyway, it's comfortable, right? Air conditioning, good lighting, good sound system, good music team, all the bells and whistles that are necessary for it to be a welcoming space. However, the first impression that someone has coming for the first time is how welcome they feel there at that door by Shirley. I've been here a number of times, not as a speaker, and I was extended the same hospitality at that door as if I was the guest speaker. That is hospitality. It's a posture. It's not just a place. You can make this place as nice as it can be, but if the coldness in your heart is not matched by the warmness in this place, then people will soon feel that coldness. You could have a place that is not as nice as some with plush seats, and yet the warmness in your heart totally compensates from the coldness of the place. A few years ago, as another act of grace and hospitality, I was invited by last week's guest speaker, and Reverend Glenn alluded to this, Reverend Joshua Sudaman, to quote some of the newly appointed or soon-to-be appointed vicars, which was a very powerful moment of healing for me, that though I was not part of the licensed clergy, Bishop Rennis discerned and very graciously asked me to remain a priest. And so Joshua inviting me to be a coach to newly appointed or soon-to-be appointed vicars was an amazing act of healing. And they were given choice. Knowing my background, Reverend Glenn picked me nonetheless. That is grace extended, hospitality given, and for me, in healing measure. Hospitality is a posture, not just a place, a person, not just a principle. Hospitality has names: Bishop Rennis Panaya, Reverend Joshua Sudaman, Reverend Glenn Chan. Lastly, hospitality is a position that we take and not just a practice that we undertake. Hospitality is a position that we take and not just a practice that we undertake. In many Middle Eastern traditions, the host, and I've witnessed this firsthand, positions himself with his back to the front door. Okay. It's very symbolic. There's a lot of symbolism in many cultures, including, our Asian culture, certainly in the Middle Eastern culture. And why is that? Why does the host sit with his back to the door? This was to symbolize hospitality and safety, protection. The symbolism was very clear, that if anyone came through that front door, say, for example, I'm the host and Reverend Glenn and his family are my guests, I would sit with my back to the door so that if any church member came against Reverend Glenn, they have to come through me first. So when I invite you to my home, when I open my home to you, I extend to you not just a meal, I extend to you hospitality, I extend to you protection, I extend to you safety. And so I pray that people who walk through these doors here at CCR, when the moment they walk through those doors, this is a place of safety, it's a place of protection, it's a place of hospitality. As Christ invites us, so do we open our arms wide to invite others. And so, quite literally in the Middle Eastern tradition, it was a position, literally a position that they took, not just a practice that they undertook. So now everybody's going to think twice about inviting anybody to their homes. You say, oh my goodness, this is what I got to do. But that's it. Hospitality is all of you, not just a meal. In my work with those in prison, which I still do, Darlene Herbert, once you are in prison, cannot get out. Everybody is involved. Even my brother was involved in prison ministry, and I continue to do that work because of my deep sense of calling in that space. In my work with those in prison, over 2/3, this is in Singapore, 2/3 have what they call a drug antecedent. In other words, the commission of a crime, even though they have nothing to do with drugs directly, was to fuel their addiction, right? Even if it wasn't selling. Okay? I've come to realize that the idea that a journalist and writer by the name of Johann Hari postulates is that addiction is more linked to a lack of meaningful human connection than just the chemical hoax that keeps one addicted. He's quoted as saying that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. So the opposite of addiction is not to be sober, to be clean from drugs or alcohol or pornography or any of the vices that gaming, gambling, even binge watching Netflix, any addictive tendencies, right, that keeps us hooked, that keeps us drawn in, is an addiction. And that addiction is, so the sobriety is not the opposite of addiction. The opposite of addiction, Johann Hari says, is connection, meaningful connection. We are social animals. We are hardwired for connection. And so, if we have nothing meaningful to connect with, we will connect with whatever available. And oftentimes, for the desperate, the lonely, the despairing, the depressed, they reach out for alcohol and drugs, and pornography, and gaming and gambling. How do you undo? How do you try to address the addiction? Yes, you can put them through a program for sobriety, but ultimately the thing that keeps them away from addiction is connection. And this place, this very place, for the students and the teachers and the canteen staff and the people in this neighborhood, this can be that place of connection. Christ invites us to be not aliens, but now brought near through His blood. So do we, in desire to be like Christ, extend our arms in hospitality. In a recent report from the Institute of Policy Studies, IPS, here in Singapore, you probably read this in the newspaper, 50% of young people between the ages of 24 or 21 and 34 reported feelings of loneliness frequently. The IPS statistics also show that 2 in 5 seniors aged 82 and above experience loneliness. That's a lot of people. A lot of people. And this is in Singapore, mind you. The irony is that we live in an urban society with people everywhere. How do you be lonely when you've got tons of people everywhere? And not only urban society, but in a hyper-connected world via social media. There is almost no spot in Singapore that you can go that you are out of data or Wi-Fi contact, right? But let me be very clear. Social media is not meaningful connection. Some of us cannot be here in person for very good reasons. Listening to the sermon online is good. It's certainly better than not being here. And again, legitimate reasons why some people can't be here. But if it's a choice, I ask you to choose this place. I ask you to choose connection. Social media cannot offer true hospitality, because hospitality is a person, not just a principle, a posture. How might CCR, how might Chapel of Christ, our Redeemer, redeem people? How can CCR be a place of connection? And I know this sounds funny, a place of connection and not just community. In other words, not just a place, but a people. That just because they step in through those doors doesn't mean that they feel connected. Something else needs to happen, and that is you. How can CCR be a people for whom community becomes the gateway to connection? that dispels loneliness and addiction and addictive tendencies. The Church of Jesus Christ is, use some big words, but I want to make a distinction here, is an ontological reality. In other words, in its essence, the Church of Jesus Christ, a mystery, beyond the institutional expression of the church, okay? An ontological reality. On the other hand, the church also has an existential expression, which is how people live out their faith in community. In this, it's existential expression, right? Beyond the mystery of the Church of Jesus Christ. In its existential expression, the church exists for the benefit of its non-members as much as for the benefit of its members. Think about it. It's one of the only social constructs anywhere in the world where membership may have its benefits, like American Express, but more so, non-membership has its benefits. That is the church. That has always been the church. A hospital, as I think either Spurgeon or Moody says, a hospital for sinners, not a museum for saints. For many churches, it's a club. It's either you're in or you're out. And if you don't dress the right way, speak the right way, you're not one of us. The church is that in its existential expression, that one place that non-members have as many benefits as members. Let's not forget that. As such, how can CCR in its existential expression be a place of radical hospitality and the lived expression of our faith for its non-members as much as for its members? I'll leave you to prayerfully discern how that lived reality might happen. The music team will lead us momentarily in a song following an invitation to you for prayer. The name of the song is entitled Christ is Lower Still. Now that sounds theologically a bit problematic. But what it really in essence means, and there are verses in Ephesians and 1 Peter that speak to the fact, and our creed talks about Christ descending into hell, because to say to us there is no human experience that Christ is not there. Christ is not lower still. In our depression, in our despair, in our darkness, in our loneliness, in our sin, Christ is there. Grace extended, hospitality extended. Off the coast of Portofino, the slide, in Italy, some 18 meters at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea, there is a sculpture called Christ of the Abyss by the Italian sculptor Guido Galletti. And here's the interesting thing. The psalmist talks about ascending the hill of God, right? Ascending to see God. Well, there's also another movement, not in opposition to it, but in addition to it. To see Christ, in this case, you need to descend 18 meters. A metaphor for the fact that there is no experience, no addiction, no loneliness, no despair, no matter how far we have hit rock bottom, as I experienced in 2014, that Christ is not there. So can I invite the music team to come? The divine host and the divine healer invites us to be hosts and healers in his likeness, in his name. And so in a moment I will ask us to be in a posture of prayer. And I'm going to ask you to do something bold. That if you feel in your heart that being a person of hospitality with the posture of hospitality, taking the position of hospitality, I want you to make a commitment to that. So would you just close your eyes and bow your heads, my dear friends? And I want you, if you desire to be a person with a posture, taking a position of hospitality, to just stand where you are as a sign of that commitment to be like Christ in opening your arms to those who will walk through these doors. To be that person, posture, position of hospitality to your family, to the family of faith, and the world that God so loved that He gave His only Son. And because your feet are firmly rooted in your faith, my friends, your arms can be wide open in the radical hospitality and embrace of the stranger, the lonely, the last, the lost, the least, all of whom need meaningful connection and all of whom can find that connection here through you, the body of Jesus Christ. And as you stand, let me just pray for you. Father, thank you for these brave souls who will go beyond themselves, beyond their fear, beyond their apprehension, beyond their introversion, to be a people of hospitality with the position and the posture of the people of God. Thank you that CCR sits in the midst of a people that need you desperately, of young people who cry out for love in spite of all the social media connections that they have, of people in this neighborhood, just diagonally across the street in flats where they live alone, of teachers who are at wit's end, of canteen operators and cleaners, of people in this community for whom this place is not just a place, but are populated with people who want to show radical hospitality. To that, I bless them, Father, in your name. Empower them, ennoble them, make them that people that, like you, reach to the depth of human experience to show love, to show grace, to show hospitality. Would you all stand as we sing our response song?